Hello. Thanks for bringing a big toy.
Thanks for having us here,
Yeah.
Sean. I'm so excited.
I hope everybody gets a good chance to look at this later today at around 3:45, when a lot of the main stage stuff has wrapped up. You'll get a chance to come take a closer look at this yourself. But there it is.
Thanks for letting us wrap it in the TechCrunch logo. We felt that we need to have it show up in theme.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. This is clearly a custom design that you guys did for us. Tell us a little bit about the truck and why something like that is important, the ability to wrap a car like this.
Yeah, I'd love to share that with you. And again, thank you for having us here and letting us be able to share more about it. And if you haven't heard of Slate Auto, we're a new company that's going to be bringing this vehicle to market. Really what our mission is we want to provide an affordable vehicle that people can customize, they're going to love and be proud to own. So we're targeting offering it at a price in the mid-20s. But what we've done is really unique in our business model is every one that we build will be in the same configuration as we build it through the manufacturing plant, and that allows us a lot of efficiencies that helps us keep that price down, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more. But when we designed it up front, we designed it so that it could be accessorized. So think of it as like an open source platform with both mechanical and electrical points that you can add things to the vehicle. And one of the things we did up front was we designed it to be wrapped, because every vehicle will be built in a slate gray color, because we're using a composite for the exterior of the vehicle. And the reason we did that is it's a lower cost and a lower investment for us to do that. So we don't need to stamp sheet metal body panels. We don't need to have a paint shop, which allows us to operate a little bit more efficiently. It does have, though, a steel structure, so don't worry, we're designing it to be a U.S. New Car Assessment Program 5-star and IIHS Insurance Institute for Highway Safety top safety pick, so it'll meet the high safety standards. But as we designed it and we're using this composite material, it allowed us to actually mold in features that help with wrapping, because we're designing it to be wrapped as a kit. We want it to be very DIY. So if you look down the side of the vehicle, you can see the hood wraps around over the top, and you see that accent line for the hood, and we carry that through the door and through the rear quarter panel. And those are actually coach joints where you can bring different parts of the wrap together in order to put it on the vehicle. We've designed that you don't have to take any of the hardware off. You don't have to take the handles off. You don't have to take the tail lamps off, and able to easily wrap. And so we were excited when we worked with yourself and your team on what was the right outfit to bring today. So happy to have it here with TechCrunch.
Yeah, you guys have done a lot of really fun wraps in trying to promote the company. I encourage people to go out and look at some of the advertisements the company's made so far. There's a lot of details there about the truck. I still have many questions, so I'm happy to have you here. You spent essentially 3 years hiding in plain sight in Troy, Michigan, right in the backyard of the world's biggest automakers, certainly the United States, operating in secret, working on this truck, working with some pretty high-profile investors. How did you keep this thing secret for that long?
We really wanted to focus on the vehicle and the mission of what we were doing, and we just didn't want to release it before it was time. We wanted to make sure that we could really deliver on our promise for the vehicle. So we kept very quiet. Although we kept very quiet, there were some individuals, yourself being one of those, that really took an interest and was quietly watching us and trying to figure out what we were doing. So we had our eye on you as you had your eye on us. But again, what I would say for myself and many others as we joined the company, this mission of bringing an affordable vehicle back was really important to us. And I know you know the stats, Sean, but the average cost of a new vehicle today is about $50,000, about a $900 monthly payment. Used vehicles are about $29,000. And that equates to about a $550 to $600 monthly payment. And recent studies have shown for a household or individual that makes $100,000 a year, to have balanced financials, you should put about $400 towards a car payment. So for those individuals that make $100,000 a year or less, it's a stretch to even get into the average used vehicle. And 70%, on average, 70% of households and individuals don't make $100,000 a year. So it's really a problem out there for a number of people. And we just really want to bring a product to market that's going to be a new vehicle, meet all the latest safety standards, will have one of the top warranties in the industry. But what's interesting is it can grow with the owner over time. So it may be somebody who's younger and single and in the 2-passenger configuration that you see it as a truck. It works really well for them. They meet the love of their life, they get married, they start a family. Without having to sell the vehicle, for about $5,000, they can convert it into a 5-passenger SUV. So the vehicle can continue to grow with them over their life as their budget allows them, or their family needs or dynamics may change. And we think that's really powerful that it can change out so much. Or I don't know, maybe a dad buys it and drives it for a few years and then wants to pass it down to his daughter. His daughter doesn't want to drive his vehicle. For a few $100s, they can get a new wrap and change it out, and it really becomes her vehicle. And she can be proud to drive it when she turns 16 because it's an extension of her personality and what she chose.
I imagine then that is also beneficial for you as a company because you keep people in the ecosystem. I want to get to that in a little bit, but I can see where things are going. One question about, back on the sort of, while you were operating in stealth, it seems like there was a limit, certainly a limit to what you wanted to say or even show about yourselves. How did that complicate recruiting people? Like, did that make it a challenge bringing people in and trying to get the right talent for this when they may not have even known you guys existed?
It was intricate and it was tricky to be able to do that because we did it very quietly. And actually at the time we were even, at some point known as Project Recar. We weren't really Slate at that time. It was very early days. But many people who were intrigued by what we were doing, because we would put postings out there and people would see and intrigued by what we were doing and bring them in and put them under NDA. And once we started to tell people, they really got enthusiastic and wanted to come on board. And then, they would quietly, their network would know because they would say, hey, I'm working on this great project. And they couldn't share a lot of details, but, had a lot of enthusiasm. And it was a bit of a challenge, but we managed to find some great talent that came on board with us. And since April, when we announced the company, announced the car, that we're Slate, it's really been tremendous for us to now have many more people that are interested in coming to be part of the team.
Yeah, I imagine a much different scenario now that you're out in public. People get eyes on the thing. They have an understanding of the business. We also, I think most of us in the room may know Jeff Bezos is a backer of the company. He led the Series A. What was the pitch that sold him on this? Why were you able to bring in someone with that kind of name recognition on what is traditionally a difficult business to build margin and returns? Automotive business is notorious for that. What was it that sold him on this?
Yeah, so Bezos Expedition, his fund, just really also passionate about this bringing back the affordable vehicle, recognizing that there is this gap in the market, and with that also very passionate about reindustrializing America. The fact that we are an American company, we will be building this in the U.S. We're reindustrializing and doing that. We've talked about it a little bit, but others may not know. When we started to look for where we wanted to do our manufacturing, we wanted to come back to a brownfield site. And what gave us a lot more flexibility is, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have a stamping operation, we don't have a paint shop. So where traditional automotive manufacturers have about 3 million to 4 million square feet that they will use for their assembly plant operation, we needed something much smaller. So we found a site in Warsaw, Indiana, about 1.4 million square feet, and it opened in the late 1950s, and it was part of R.R. Donnelley, and what they did for many, many years is they printed catalogs and phone books. Mm-hmm. And as you can imagine...
Not the first guess at where an automotive factory would
Yeah, no, but, for me, what I remember, back when I was growing up is getting that JCPenney catalog, and you'd, circle what you wanted from Santa, or, your parents at Christmas time, and, fast forward to today, there's Amazon wish list and other things that, people shop to know. And, unfortunately, there's no longer the need for this operation. So in 2023, they closed their door at the height of their employment. They employed over 3,000 people in the community. When they closed, they were at about 650 people. So we're excited because we've been able to come in and partner with a great community. They have a thriving workforce there, and they're very excited to have us there. So it's been a great partnership with Warsaw, Indiana, Kosciuszko County, and just really excited to be there and reindustrialize that area of the U.S.
Have you been getting feedback from Jeff Bezos and his people on the truck as you've been in development and design?
Jeff's really pretty hands-off. We've had interface where we invited him in, and he came and joined us once along the journey and looked at the vehicle, and we talked a little bit about what the future may be. But other than that, he's very hands-off on and really letting us focus on getting the vehicle to market.
You've been touring around the country. We're not the only ones who've seen this in person. You've brought it to seemingly every corner of the country so far. I'm sure you have more places to go. Has there been feedback about the truck that has surprised you from some of those engagements with people?
We see a lot of enthusiasm, and you can, if you're interested in knowing more about where we're going and what we're going to be doing, we have our Slate 2 State tour at Slate Auto, and we've gone to a number of places, and I think for many individuals that are enthusiastic about it but maybe a little bit hesitant, they can't get a good sense for the size of the vehicle, and we get a lot of comments or concerns from people about, I think it's going to be too small. Because we call it a compact truck, and I think in many people's minds they think is it a micro-sized truck? And when they come and see it, and when they actually are able to look at it and sit in it and see the size and everything, they get a lot more comfortable with what it is. The other thing that people get really excited about is the frunk. When you think about a truck, typically you have that internal combustion engine that's up in front, and you don't have a lot of dry lockable storage where you can securely bring things with you. We really took a lot of time to look at how would people use that, and people of all sizes, and wanted to make sure that it was very usable. So really proud of our design and engineering team. One of the things they did is when thinking about the cooling module, the radiator that's in the front, they took that and tipped it at an angle and pushed it down. And so what that's allowed is the lift over to get into the frunk is much lower. So somebody of my stature at about 5'2", I can easily get things in and out, and I don't have to worry that I'm going to have to brush up against that front bumper, get my pants dirty and things like that. But you can put 2 carry-on suitcases in that area, so really a lot of space there. And then the size of it as well, especially for larger guys, are often concerned. And even if people can't see it, what we try to do to convey that to people is Cobb Burton, who is the leader of our Slate agent team, those that talk to our customers and answer questions. Cobb is 6'7", and we've done a social media video of it being Cobb approved, so Cobb gets in and out, and Cobb lays in the bed, and it helps to give people an idea of whether they can fit in it or not, even if they haven't been able to come and see us at a Slate 2 State.
It's a minor thing, I think, in the long run, but it's a really interesting thing about what you guys have done so far, where you've raised a lot of money. You raised something more than like $700 million to date, but you still seem to be really leveraging the talent that you have in creative ways, whether it's him fitting in the truck to prove that out, using your head comms guy to do the voiceover in your video. It feels like a very small company still. I imagine that's going to be a little trickier to balance as you grow, because I'm sure you're hiring like crazy.
Yeah, we are doing a lot of hiring, but we always want to have that as part of our culture. We do have some principles that we follow, and one of them we talk about is that we're fast, we're frugal, we're scrappy. So we know that we need to be fast. We've got to have a lot of speed as we're bringing the vehicle to market. We want to be scrappy in those things we do. One of those being using our head comms guy to be our voiceover in that. And frugal in just we really want to be thoughtful about how we use every dollar and make sure that we're very purposeful and not wasteful, so that we, our investors entrust us in the investment that they've given us, and we want to make sure that we put that to best use.
It feels like you guys were very ahead of the curve on what seems to be a tangible move back towards buttons and knobs and away from the big glossy touchscreens in modern cars. I'm sure part of that is a cost thing, but also there's a philosophical backing to a decision like that. But you still have to have some software that runs on this truck, right? You've got a battery pack that needs some software development to be able to manage it and things like that. Can you give me a sense of sort of the software experience of this truck, whether that is infotainment or what's controlling the actual motors and the battery and everything like that?
So we have within the vehicle, again, if you're not familiar with it, we have no infotainment system. So we've taken that out of the vehicle, and the infotainment system is, if you look at J.D. Power survey and other, it's by far the highest dissatisfaction item that people have in frustration with their vehicle. And our viewpoint on this was, why try and replicate what people are very much happy with and they take with them every day as their phone, or if you'd like to have a larger screen, a tablet. And to give you an example of, again, this accessorization, we have a accessorization bar or rail that's at the lower part of the instrument panel where you can add a bracket and put your phone in or put a tablet in, and we will be designing an app that interfaces with your systems on your phone that you already use. So for whatever your nav, if Google Maps is preferred or Waze is preferred, we'll have a soft button that quickly gets you there for whatever your streaming audio is, for whatever your key contacts are. So that's an element. Our app is an element of software, but it comes in on your phone, and we just want to get you to what it is that you know and use. And the reason we want to be able to offer that is we do want, for driver distraction, people keep their eyes on the road, so provide them nice big buttons on the phone or tablet. But the software architecture that we have is really, it's a distributed architecture. It's something that's well known within the auto industry. We're not chasing the computer on wheels. We really want to keep it as a pretty basic system, but for those around the auto industry, it's a CAN communication network, and it's a distributed, not as integrated as others. But we do have the battery management system. We do have our vehicle control unit, and we have the other electronics that you need for safety systems that are there. And we have one screen in the vehicle. It's the Vehicle Information Center in front of the driver. That's where you'll get your backup camera. That's where you'll get your speed information, and it'll have all the telltales for any malfunction that may happen in the vehicle to give you the right indication if you may need a repair or if your tire pressure's low or whatever that may be. That's
like an inversion of where the modern car industry is now, where they have their own software and the phones are intruding on it. You guys are flipping it and saying, use your phone, we'll intrude on it a bit. Not that word, I'm sure you don't use it, but you have an app experience. But there are a lot of companies. GM just announced a big integration with Gemini. We see there's some Alexa operation in cars. Are we ever going to see something like that in one of these cars?
If it comes in, it'll be offered through something that comes through the consumer electronics.
Okay.
And it's one of the things that we think was important in this vehicle. Others in the industry, the approach they're taking, I think, works very well for them and their brand and other customers. Again, we're coming into a space where we want to do something a little bit different and offer a different proposition. We've decoupled the vehicle from the consumer electronics life cycle. So in a few years, not even in a few years, it just seems month over month over month, there's always, new phones, new tablets. That accessorization rail allows you to bring in anything that you want to bring in. So it's not that embedded screen where it's there, it's like a monument. This is just bring it in and change it out as you would like to as the owner. And it's really, a lot of us is about putting the power of choice into the hands of the customer, the owner, that this vehicle can live with them over time.
You want to sell the vehicle, you want to sell customization on the vehicle, you want to sell wraps and everything like that. Can you briefly give me just a breakdown? What do you expect those business lines to look like? Is it, margin on the truck and additional gravy on those accessories like that? Or is that ancillary stuff really going to float what is a sort of cost parity business on the truck?
Yeah. Well, so let me first just kind of share how we think about the accessory ecosystem, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit about your question. So there are parts of the accessory business that we will own and we will offer. So for example, the SUV kit, we will design that, we will offer that. That will be tested as we test the truck as well, so that it also meets that U.S. New Car Assessment Program 5-star, and Insurance Institute for Highway Safety top safety pick. So we want to be very thoughtful about how we do that, and it's provided by Slate. There will be other partners that we work with that will make certain designs for us that will be offered, roof racks and different things like that, and other things that we'll offer. If you look at the front of the vehicle, and this is something we think is, again, really unique in the industry. We've got the center plate. If you see it there, it says Slate, and then it has the daytime running lamps on either side, and it has a grid pattern over those. Those 3 parts are all removable. And we will offer some custom designs that can go in that area. We've got the design team's been working on like some California themed ones where like over the daytime running lamps it looks like a sunset, and we've played around with like wedding themes where there's like hearts and doves that go over those. But we will release all of the data information on that, and anybody can 3D print their own. So we also want that individuals don't feel they have to come to us. We want to create an ecosystem that'll be on our website, Slate Marketplace. So we do plan that every vehicle we make is gonna, earn money for us, and our accessories will be a big part of our business case as well, but we're not trying to lock that up and own it. We really want to allow others to thrive through what we do and be part of this ecosystem of, growth around Slate and a community around Slate.
That marketplace you mentioned, are you going to take a cut of what gets sold on there from those third parties?
Yeah, we'll take some amount of fee when we work with them, but we won't hold it to them. I mean, if they wanted to, they could choose to go market it on Etsy. I mean, it's okay. Their power of choice in what they do. It's not as if we're going to behold them to us. We believe we're going to create a great environment in which they're going to want to be there because they're going to be along with the truck and along with all the other accessories that are there. And we have a slate maker today where you're able to see some of the accessories on the vehicle, and as we evolve that, as we get closer to launch next year, we'll work with these third parties to make sure that we get the right images of their product, and then you can actually see their product on the vehicle to see what it looks like. So we hope that community will want to come and work with us because you can actually see it on the vehicle versus going to an Etsy. But if somebody is on Etsy today or some other platform and that's how they want to sell it, they're free to do that.
So there will be a lot of incentives for them to come do it on your part and trade off for that fee.
We think so. Yeah. We think, being able to see it on the vehicle and interface, and similarly, you can see it in different colors, you can see it with different wraps. We think there's going to be a lot of benefit to the seller of that component because of what the potential customers can see and do.
Your Series A was led by Bezos Expeditions. Your Series B was led by Mark Walter, who's the CEO of Guggenheim Partners, co-owner of the Dodgers, big night for him last night, and Thomas Tull. You're currently closing a Series C from what I've heard, or you're getting close. Should we expect that to be more high net worth individuals, or are you looking more strategic for that investment? What's that looking like?
So we've been extremely fortunate to date, as you mentioned, and we talked about a little bit. Bezos Expedition was our lead for our A. TWG Global was the lead for our B, who you rightly mentioned. It's Mark Walter and Thomas Tull that really supported us in that round. We are in Series C at this point. We're starting to near, the conclusion of that. We're really excited because we are seeing a number of our current partners that want to carry along with us again on this round. Sure. But we're also seeing new investors wanting to come in and really just enthusiastic about the product, what the reception has been from, the market. We've got over 100,000 reservations and growing every day. The enthusiasm from the industry, from everybody getting a lot of confidence. And so we're just seeing a little bit of a new profile, but also well-known, high-qualified investors that want to come on the journey with us.
Is there value in trying to chase a strategic? I mean, you guys are pretty set up vertically, it seems, at this point, with a factory, with design and everything, but is there something that a strategic partner could bring to you guys in an investment scenario?
I would say we're always open to considering anything that might come.
Yeah.
You never know, and we'll consider anybody who wants to come and talk to us. We're always open to just sharing and seeing what the opportunity might be, and that goes beyond just investors, and we look for partnerships across the board. And I know, Sean, you know, and as well, today we announced our partnership with RepairPal for a service provider for us. So for accessory installation and service for the vehicle, we do not plan to build out our own network. RepairPal, which is part of Yelp, is going to be our provider, and they have over 4,000 independent service providers today that are within your community that we'll be working with in order to get accessories installed or any repair or service work done. And we've licensed with Tesla to be on their charging network, so give people peace of mind about where the vehicle can be charged. So again, as we move along with time, we'll always consider whether it's an investor or whether it's another element of the business that we can do what seems like the right strategic partnership.
You were born out of an incubator in Massachusetts called Rebuild Manufacturing. I find it a really fascinating origin story for this company, because then you were brought on as operator, as CEO. We've seen a lot of EV startups come and go. I would argue in large part because of the egos associated with the people who led those companies, some of those founders, and their unwillingness to get out of the way. Do you feel unburdened by that? Like, is it good to have this kind of operator model where you were coming out of this thing and you can just kind of get going, and there's not really, someone with their name on the hood that's standing over you making decisions for you?
Well, I'll share a little bit more about kind of you're informed about Rebuild and kind of how we came to be. So let me share a little bit more about that. So Rebuild Manufacturing was founded about 5 years ago, and its charter is in its name. They want to rebuild American manufacturing. The founders of that company, Jeff Wilkie and Miles Arnone, were very passionate about rebuilding American manufacturing. And Miles had this idea. Miles is the CEO, just one day had this idea and thought, he's like, where have all the affordable vehicles gone? They're just not out there. And he, thought about, there used to be the VW Beetle, and his actual favorite is the old Jeep Cherokee, like the old XJ.
Sure.
And just felt that it was absent, and had this idea and talked to Jeff. And Jeff said, hey, you got a company to run. You don't need to worry about an auto company. But Miles was so passionate about it. He Rebuild follows a lot of the Amazon way, and so he wrote a PR FAQ that set the vision for what you see today, of bringing this affordable vehicle back, built in a configuration of one, how that helps make manufacturing efficient using this asset-light ecosystem of how to bring it to market. And they iterated back and forth on it. One of their board members, Will Barker, came into the fold as they were going back and forth. So they, wrote this document, and at one point just felt it was powerful enough to take their board, get a little bit of seed money if the board approved, and then see where it went. And so they took it to their board in early 2022. The board was very excited about it, put in a little bit of money, but they recognized that although it's a great idea and strategically a great concept, that they hadn't really worked in the auto industry. It was going to be difficult. It's not an easy task to, bring in a car. So for me, when I became aware that there was an opportunity and started to meet with them and was really intrigued by the idea and thought, wow, this is really a big, bold idea. But there was something there that can be done with that. And through that, was very excited when they asked me to come on board as employee number 2 and be the CEO. And what I've come to appreciate through this is the power of a leadership team that has the founders that continually remind me of the strategic vision. And I bring the operating side, where then I can remind them of, hey, here are some of the challenges that go along the way. And I think it's just a really powerful blend that continually challenges myself and my team on, yes, that may have been how you've done it when you've been at other places in the auto industry, but why? But why do you have to do it that way? And sometimes it makes merit to continue it that way. But many times we do need to disrupt and transform, and that's the really good balance of this is, knowing when you want to stay within the lines and knowing when, you know what, no, you can just go ahead and do something very different.
We're almost out of time. I'll do a real quick yes/no lightning round.
Okay.
Will you ever license autonomous technology from another company to put on this car?
No comment.
Tesla has said that they've open sourced their patents over the years for other people to make EVs. Do you use any of those patents on this?
We are not, to my knowledge.
150-mile base range. Do you expect that to be a double-digit percentage of people who buy that, or is everybody going to buy up to the 240 miles?
No, we think it'll be double digit.
Yeah. And did you ever want to run a car company?
I never thought I'd be able to, like in this fashion. As I've recently said to actually some of the founders in that, even now as employee number 2 and being here, you know, three and a half years, and I mean, I'm an early one where, you know, it seems like so short but so long. I still tell them, like, every day I feel like get up and pinch me, because it's just tremendous to be able to come and have this impact. And also the team that's joined on board is just such a strong, talented team that I feel blessed to be part of this great journey.
Well, we're excited to see where it goes. Chris Barman, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Sean.